Welcome to the Books Applied podcast, presented by WSL Leadership. In this podcast, we talk about an awesome book and how to apply it to your work, sport, or life. I'm your host, Iggy Perillo. Thanks for joining me. On this episode of the Books Applied podcast, we're talking about the book Breath by James Nestor, and I'm here with Lenka Koppova, and I am so excited to be talking with you about this book. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the folks, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And hi, guys. I'm Lenka, and I'm a marketer. So it's an interesting perspective to be talking about a health and well-being book. Hopefully, it's going to make sense at some point why we are talking about this book in particular. I am absolutely obsessed with health and well-being. And as a marketer, I work with health and well-being professionals, helping them figure out marketing, find what feels good in their marketing and help them make more impact in the world of healing and health by the skills that I have, which is marketing.
Gotcha. I know we discovered in another conversation we both really enjoyed this book. But how did you find this book initially? How did you come across it, or how did it come into your world?
Yeah, so this book came to my world through my obsession with neuroscience, just getting into the health and well-being. And it was mentioned on a podcast that I absolutely love from Andrew Huberman Lab podcast. And he was going through a couple books every now and then. And similar book to this one also he mentioned is Jaws, not like the shark Jaws, but our eating Jaws. And then I think this book was just about coming out because it's a pretty recent book. And he was talking about quite a lot. So then I was like, well, it's not the first time I was introduced to breath work and breath techniques through meditation and yoga and experimentation and being aware of the Wim Hof. I've known a little bit, but I was like, okay, there is a book all about it. Let me give it a try. And I was obsessed since the beginning. And this is a book that I keep recommending to anyone and everyone. It was like, there's so much in there. They'll be like, oh gosh, this is a must read.
That's awesome. I definitely had a super big moment of popularity when it first came out. I couldn't even get a hold of it at my library. It was on hold forever and ever and ever. I got it and then I had to give it back because people wanted it so soon. I didn't have a chance to read. It was very popular. And yeah, you mentioned Wim Hof, also very popular in this sort of breath work. He's sort of known for the cold immersion side, but breath is obviously a part of his whole deal too. So I'm curious, what stood out from you from this book as someone who works with health professionals and probably sees a lot of what's going on out there? And I like health. I think being healthy, is a good thing, broadly speaking, for human beings and myself. Yeah. What stood out to you, or what really caught your attention as you were reading this?
Well, I think it's the title of a book says it all. It's the combination of modern scientific research, but also uncovering some of the ancient wisdom that we've known for the years and going through the history of healthcare, medicine, and discovering all the things we've forgotten and all the pioneers that, have been there before. And just because they didn't have the traditional doctor title, people did not take them seriously. But the incredible amount of healing that we can do through breath. And a couple of quotes, even from the beginning of the book, that really resonated with me. And I keep reminding myself of that. And one of them says that there are as many ways to breathe as there are foods to eat, which we don't think about breath as something, there is a variety of it.
Oh, definitely not in my Western culture life. No, you just breathe. It just happens.
Exactly. And on kind of my quest to figure out how to live happier, healthier, this book that actually says that the missing pillar of health is breath, which it's fascinating that we believe that breath and this whole system is one of the unconscious processes, one of the autonomic systems that our brain or our body does automatically that we cannot control, like our digestion and our heart rate. There's certain things, our hormones, we cannot control. And yet, for me, that was a massive aha moment before I even through this book. Realize how much control we have and how much things like nose breathing and mouth breathing and inhales and exhales and slow and fast or intense. These little nuances in the breath, like how much they can actually heal.
Yeah. And this guy did the research, right? He wasn't just like, hey, here's some surveys of traditions, he did the surveys of traditions, which are great, like going back to Yoga Sutras in 500 BCE, right? So this is not new. And he talks about how the sort of ancient version of yoga, you just were laying around breathing. There wasn't like the stretching, like modern yoga is very stretchy and movie and you're sweating and, all these different things. He's describing these sort of classic ancient versions that were really the breath, and that was it. That was like the whole practice, all the way up to today, where he did some tests on himself. Like, and you mentioned this, like one of the big pieces of the book is a story of mouth breathing versus nose breathing, and how those have such a different impact on our health, broadly speaking. And as someone myself who's like, well, either I'm breathing or I'm panting because I just ran, or whatever. I'm breathing normal or fast, or I'm coughing because whatever, something got in my face. That's about it. Like, I don't think before this book really thought about it. And I know there's like breath practices. I guess I've encountered like the square breathing practice where you breathe in and you hold and you breathe out and you hold, which he's like, yeah, that's not the best one. And I was like, oh, tell me more. He gets very specific. What did you find interesting? Like, I know there's lots of health benefits he talked about. Did any of those catch your eye as you were reading the specific health things that he talked about?
I think for really resonated with me was also the speed in which we can tinker with our health. Like, as you touched on with the experiment he did with himself and a colleague, where taking, a couple days, or I think it was 10 days, to blow their noses and breathe through their mouth and do all the sorts of testing to figure out what's happening with their health, and then going back to nasal breathing, and then looking at other people, how quickly actually breath work and specific practices can really change our physical look, not only like some of the heart rate and oxygen levels and stuff like that, but how they can actually change our features of how we look like in the face, and how even our body, like healing scoliosis through breathing. Like some of the
Yeah.
studies that they were like looking at and showing how different breathwork practices can heal things that are incurable, that are normal, modern, popular science and health care system doesn't know what to do with that. And then there were proof after proof after proof that breath work can really do miracles. And it's, for me, it's been just the depth of how much can be impacted by breath was something that keeps me coming back to this book, to remind myself of the things that I could be doing, I should be doing. And one of the things that's a little bit in this book, and it is a lot more in the other book I mentioned in Jaws, it's also how connected our breath is with our teeth and health, and how the quality of our teeth actually can showcase our overall health, and how the capacity of our lungs can impact our overall health. There's so many beautiful things in this book, and it's very practical. That's what I love. It's very practical.
Oh yeah, super simple, right? Like the simplest between breathing through your nose versus breathing through your mouth. And like it didn't have like a photograph, but there were these two diagrams of people. I'm like, oh, I know people like that. Like their jaw seems like it's not like they have an overbite, but like their jaw seems short and small, and their nose is like extended out. Like, oh, that's just genetics, blah blah blah. I'm like, but he would say that sort of facial type versus kind of like the stronger, like wider jaw, like stronger cheekbones, like that whole sort of facial structure is a factor of nose breathing, and like the weaker kind of thin jaw is like a mouth breathing factor, and he sees it over time in people. And like, yeah, there's a part where they did a study and like the bone mass of your face changed. Like, what? The bone mass, like you'd measure bone mass changes in your face, like 14% bone mass change, which means that basically your face is, I don't know, I guess that means your airways are like more available and open. It means your face is like more open for air to get in and out, which is wild. Yeah, that your bones change depending on how you breathe.
Yeah, and it goes from, if you breathe through your nose, you have less cavities, like you're talking about teeth health. Like obviously chewing and things like that. But also the nasal breathing is then connected to sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there.
Oh, you were talking about cavities and mouth health from nasal breathing.
The nasal breathing can impact the oral health. That there's so many other things that it is related to, simply as breathing through your nose can have such a massive impact on so many aspects. This was such a big aha moment for me in there.
Absolutely. And he makes this other interesting point that so basically his recommendations, breathe through your nose, not through your mouth. Like, that's an easy one, right? And he has this practice of mouth taping. So when you sleep, if your mouth falls open, you may end up breathing through your mouth. So you put a little teeny piece of tape and hold your mouth shut, which I don't know if you tried for a while. I tried for a while and I was like, okay, I think I'm actually kind of normally breathing through my nose at night anyway. So that was weird and fun and interesting. Like, fun practice. And theoretically, you train yourself to do it naturally if you're a mouth breather while you are sleeping. But he also talked about how you're affecting the CO2 levels in your body. So breathing through your nose regulates your CO2 levels in a way that is better. I mean, I forget if it's like up or down, to be honest. Like, there's like, he gets into the very specific science I'm glossing over. And so we feel more anxious, like we need to breathe more when our CO2 levels, when we have a low tolerance for high CO2 levels. So we have a higher, when CO2 gets to a certain height in our body, we are signaled to breathe. And we feel like we have to like pant or breathe faster and faster and faster if we can't handle a higher CO2 level in our body, right? So he said some of these breathing practices, like slower, but you don't even have to breathe deeply, just slower, shallow breaths, you will build your tolerance to higher CO2, and then you will consistently breathe more slowly. And so you will feel less of that sense of anxiety in your body. I'm like, ooh, fascinating. And I think some of the, like a lot of things, he's like, there's a study in this thing, like he's studying, looking at studies out there in the world and pulling them in. But the idea that your breathing ties to your sense of anxiety, like I thought was fascinating.
And even on this topic, he talks about cycles, like the cycles that we're switching actually between left and right nostril, and that different breathing techniques. Then if you breathe more through your right, which is the one that gives you energy and wakes you up and makes you more focused. And if you focus on breathing through your left, then it's more calming and effective, because different nostrils are more linked to certain, pathways in our brain and in certain functions. One thing that was so random in there is the connectivity between nose and our, how to keep it PG? Well, our reproductive system.
Sure, exactly.
We have the same erectile kind of nerve endings that we have in our private parts in our nose, and it's connected. And that was fascinating to really learn why our nose is connected and how that impacts our, again, health and well-being, and potentially then dysfunctions in this area that it could be caused, again, by breathing.
Right. It all just comes down to breathing, people. And we do it all the time. We don't think about it or care. Most of us do it all the time. We all do it all the time. Most of us don't think or care about it at all, for sure. And so, yeah, slower breathing, which, I feel like we've heard that for a while. Like, that's not new. Like, slow down your breathing. Like, usually it's in the form of take a deep breath, slow down. You're like, that's kind of common encouragement we give to people when they're getting hyped up or freaking out or whatever it is, slowing down. But he would say slow down all the time. Like, you are doing better for your whole body, every system in your body. He talks also about the nose to like stomach connections and like gut, basically like the sort of gut and breathing connections, and that nerves go both ways between our breathing system and our like digestive system, essentially like our stomach. But he is like, yeah, and I think we're finding more and more that our digestive tract is definitely like nerves go out as well as in, from that whole digestive eating system. But our breath can affect how we process food. And he like one of his, like, there's so many claims. I'm like, really? Is that true? Like, really? Is that true? Like, because they're just phenomenal. When he says that, like, if we are burning fat in our body, 20% of that is released through, I think, heat, but the other 80% is released through carbon dioxide. So we're actually breathing out dismantled fat within our body. And like, as not a biological scientist, I'm like, that seems crazy and cool. So I need to breathe more, but I need to breathe right, I guess, theoretically.
That was a fascinating comment in there, that majority of weight loss actually happens through our exhales, that because of how the carbon dioxide works and how it then binds some of the moisture, some of the water in there, that we actually think, like, if you think of weight loss, I don't think of exhales as the way
no one thinks of breathing as like a weight loss plan.
Yeah, I either burn some fat, I burn it through activity, I sweat it out, I go to toilet, I excrete it, but I don't think of like me exhaling more and slowing down my breathing actually then makes an impact on the weight loss, which again, all the areas that breath touches on with all these different aspects, that's been one of the things of this book, that it's just such a wealth of insights that you can go through and through so many times again, and always find something new. Like even just the fact that majority of the humankind right now will struggle with, in either insomnia or sleep apnea, snoring, and those kind of things, that we consider allergies and intolerances as kind of a normal thing. If like pretty much everyone has it, but the fact that it's common doesn't make it normal, it doesn't make it healthy.
Right, right.
At the beginning, he talks about that evolution doesn't necessarily mean progress. It just means that there is a change. And that somehow with our breathing, we have evolved in a wrong direction, potentially. That the way our lives are designed, the way our modern world works with, softer foods and more mouth breathing and more isolation within houses, that we're not so exposed to the pollens and all sorts of things, that we're actually making ourselves kind of de-evolutionized.
Yeah, we're not heading in a good direction, right?
That's the thing.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this specifically, like the soft foods, where they basically have done anthropological studies of older and older, like we find skulls out there in the world, older and older skulls, and the structures of the face and the teeth are stronger because, and the theory is that, and even you can see like the jaw definition and things like that, because they actually had to chew more. Like food wasn't cooked, it wasn't soft. They weren't just drinking purees out there. They had to like gnaw on the things and like chomp them up a bit. And so that muscular effort contributed again to this whole sense of like health, because that also helps build your airways. Oh yeah, that's like the facial bone structure helps open your airways. But so did chewing and using your mouth for food while you're using your nose for breathing. And that combination, supports like longevity in humans, surviving, living, being happy and healthy, I guess, over time.
And again, it's at any age. Like some of the studies were like not young people there are a couple of studies that come up with like examples of when, people in their 60s, 70s who potentially their health has seen deteriorate so much, and they have been pretty much left there to die through whatever, be it an illness, an old age, or things like that. And then they were taught, certain breathing techniques and focusing on the breath. And then out of nowhere, they could walk again. They could, live again. They look 20 years younger again. It's fascinating that such a simple thing that, and for me, is the low cost solution to so many things where, we all have it. We don't need to pay anything for it. It's not a medication. It's not a pill. It's not a prescription. It's not something that we would have to pay gym membership and PTs. Like some of these techniques are so ridiculously simple, yet just getting into the practice of them that can really change our lives.
Oh yeah, he says like it's like breathe in shallowly for 5.5 seconds and out for 5.5 seconds. It's like that's it. Mm-hmm. That's your prescription. Through your nose, do that. Like why not? why are we not doing these things? Which leads me to the next part. I'm curious. I tried mouth taping for a little while and I was like, this is cool. I think I'm good. Did you try any of his basically to practice any of the things that he suggested? Mouth taping, one kind of weird example, but breathing or other things that he was intentionally about suggesting throughout the book to increase that nasal openness or breathing pace or nose breathing.
Yeah, I tried quite a few techniques in there. Not the mouth taping, because I think I'm one of those people who is reasonably good with nasal breathing. But I am noticing every time I'm exercising that maybe I need to tape my mouth for exercises.
Oh, I tried that too. That is tough. I was running and jogging more at the time. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to keep my mouth shut while I run this hill. I'm like, okay, that's really hard. I'm going to keep it shut for as far as I can get up this hill because I ran out of air, Anyway, yeah. So you tried that. Mouth closed while exercising. Fun.
Focusing on also increasing the exhales. So it is again, removing more of the carbon dioxide from the system, having smaller inhales, longer exhales, especially when exercising. Because again, it goes completely counterintuitive to breathe less and exhale more when exercising. To start with, it's incredibly uncomfortable. But again, it's so fascinating how quickly our brain adapts, how quickly, once we process the whole thing, oh, I'm getting anxiety, I don't have enough air, to then be like, well, I do have enough air. I'm just building my tolerance to having more of the carbon dioxide in there. Well, okay, it's fine. I can consciously get myself into this state. And then it really helps, like this breathing techniques. And I know it's a lot of what, for example, even Wim Hof's method is doing, and ice therapy, cold baths. It's just getting yourself in a control settings, in a agitated state, in an uncomfortable state where your body is having an intense reaction, to then still be clear in your mind, to be like, I know that my body is freaking out and my functionalities are all over the place because I am pushing myself. But yet I know that there's nothing going on, there's nothing wrong, there's no reason to be anxious. And these kind of practices that help with mental health issues, with actual anxiety, panic attacks in the moments where we get physiologically more used to this sensation and they don't freak us out as much anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think like you sort of nailed this part where if we feel like we need to breathe and we can't breathe, we get anxious. So if we realize that feeling like we need to breathe when we can't breathe is not anxiety, that's just breathing, we build our mental tolerance for that as well as our physiological tolerance. Like I think physiologically, people are like, like they have to train themselves both. And we can do that just through breathing. We can, and basically, I mean, he talked about lowering heart rate, lowering blood pressure, lowering all these like measurable metrics, right? Just by how we breathe and just by how we are acting in the moment. Yeah, it seems, and exactly what you said. It's so low barrier. just breathing, people. It's just breathing.
And with lots of techniques and modalities, you do need to practice for a long time to get any benefits. If it's meditation, mindfulness, yoga, lots of things do take a long while and commitment to see benefits. But with breath, it's as remembering things like psychological sigh, that is kind of the something like the double inhale, exhale, that it's the thing that we do naturally, babies do naturally when we cry. And that's a system. There is an actual physiological function behind this that calms us down. And it's within the grasp. Like you don't need to necessarily practice for it. You just need a little bit of an alert to know when something's happening, to be like, well, I need to take a deep breath, take a little bit more and release, and do it a few times. And within a couple of seconds, the system starts slowing down because you tapped into some of the physiological mechanism for tapping into and turning on the parasympathetic system for slowing down.
Oh yeah, he's like within 10 to 20 breaths. Like do that for 10 breaths. And I think if I try to breathe deeply for 10 breaths, I'm like, I definitely notice a difference, right? It is noticeable. And I think, that was the other thing I'd practiced from this book. I'm like, I'm thinking, it's time to go to bed. Like literally 10 deep breaths. Like my body's like slowing down. Like it's so much easier. I think I've trained myself to fall asleep easier. And it's so blatantly simple. Like that's, I think, the shocking part of this book. There's interesting science. It's easy to read. Like the book, I think, is super engaging. There's lots of stories, and it's pretty wide ranging, the things he covers. And it boils down to super simple things that you can try right now. You can just start doing. You can, I think some of the other ones, like the slower breathing, like the 5.5 second in and out breathing, just sort of as a normal pace, trying to pace yourself like that. He said like within 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I think, people are noticing blood pressure decrease, or they're noticing heart rate, average heart rate decrease. And I think, it doesn't take that long versus, like some other practices, you're like years of practice, years of, training for different types of sport or health related, just health practices, all those different things.
And it's how little we need to practice it. Like again, to get proper benefits from meditation, yes, 5 minutes is nice, but often you really get benefits when you get into it, when you give it 20 minutes, 2 times per day. Where again, with breath work, what he was showing, after lunch, take 10, 20 breaths. Before sleep, take 10, 20 breaths. Before doing something. It's like the 30-second, 1 minute kind of a quick win that we can all start adapting now. So for me, all sorts of the pranayama techniques that he was mentioning, the alternate nostril breathing. I started measuring which nostril is on occasionally, like which nostril is on right now. How I started being with doses, like, does it change with my cycle? Does it change with the moon? Because he was touching on some of those things. Touching on that, like our night nasal cycling might be linked with people around the world, and we're kind of in this whole global breathing pattern together. So I was kind of observing myself only with how these patterns might change, testing a little bit the left, right, some of the more fiery breathing techniques to get your energy up. Like I did practice the Wim Hof or the Tumo breathing techniques before that as well. And with this book, kind of increasing some of the slower and lower pacing as well, which then did, and this book did get me into obsession with free diving and considering if I should start practicing my breath work so I can go free diving.
Oh yeah, this was like sort of the sequel to his free diving book, where he researched basically more individuals and this practice of free diving. And he's like, whoa, there's all this stuff about breathing. Holy cow! That like basically spawned this whole other book, right? But that's where he started. But yeah, and that's like a super specialized, like that's even more specialized, right? Like how do we breathe? How do we dive super deeply, essentially with like one breath, right? How do we make one breath work for us for fundamentally a long time, but also under pressure, underwater? It's not like you can just be like, oh, JK, I want to breathe now, in very easy ways. Well, so this, I think, leads to a great segue to what do you think this book will inspire you to do more of in the future or change? Like are there still things you want to try or that practices you've started now that you want to continue because of this book?
Every single time I read it, there's something new that I want to try. It is
there's a lot.
I was rereading it before our chat and I was like, well, do I chew enough? Like thinking like if I actually do enough hard foods, I'm like, well, maybe I need to buy more carrots and eat more hard foods. It was one of the things that to be conscious of the consistency of the foods I eat. Like what are the things and how am I processing, especially vegetables and harder things, like do I eat enough hard foods? That was one of the things. And I still want to explore other things in the book. I want to go more with the lower and slower because usually I am going with a higher and more intense. So for me, and the combination of really bringing it into my practice as I'm going more back into my health and fitness, going more to gym or going more exercising, doing more cardio, I'm really noticing in those moments that's when my mouth breathing comes in. So rereading this book was a very good reminder to be like, we are not using your mouth. Like there was one advice, shut your mouth. And I think that's perfect summary of this book. And that's what I really want to going forward to really be more attention and uncomfortable. Like it starts with being uncomfortable, but the benefits are just worth it so much.
I agree with you a little bit. I'd read this a while ago, then kind of revisited it for our conversation also. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't been paying attention for a while. Like, how am I doing on my breathing? How am I doing on my like breathing while exercising? I know like a lot of runners have been in the news lately. There's been a lot of different, competitions happening. And he talks about a certain runner who would always run sprints with her mouth closed. And people are like, she looks like she's like having a great time out there. She looks like she's not even stressed because she has trained herself to breathe through her mouth. Because normally, if you just think of the picture of a runner, you think of a picture with their mouth open, right? Like that's like the vision of a runner that most of us, I would say, if we think about their mouth at all, probably open, panting, that something like that at some point. Yeah, I think this was a great reminder to me to be thoughtful again about my breathing, which, yeah, shutting my mouth. I think I'm pretty good. I don't know. I should put my little mouth tape on during the day if I'm just working and really see, because if nothing else, it lets you know when you like are going to go to open your mouth. Like it's not going to work if we're having a conversation, like, obviously. But I think there are times when I'm just working on things. I'm like, I wonder, like I'm not super aware. I think this is calling my mind back to be aware again of my breathing pace and also nose versus mouth. I think I'm good with my nose. I don't know. I'm going to find out. I'm going to revisit.
This book is incredible in just giving you little things so you can tinker with, you can play with on your own. It's not something that you really need any special machines. You don't need to buy any smartwatches. You don't need to buy any meters so you can test yourself or commit, again, hours to going to gym, doing things differently, go to different things of, eating or living. It's the smallest things of, put tape over your mouth, or, think if you chew enough, or when you can't sleep, well, instead of being on your phone, just focus on the longer exhale. And it goes to practices of things like yoga nidra, which is genuinely just focusing on longer exhales. That's it.
So great. So easy. Well, do you have any other startling realizations from this book that you need to share with us? Because I feel like we've covered a lot. Like, this is a very wide-ranging book. I think we've hit on 85% of it. And probably not even, though, because there's so many fun little nuggets and twists and turns and stories that he brings out. Is there any other pieces on your mind you want to make sure we talk about as we move toward wrapping up a little bit?
I think just the overall realization that we can take more control, we should take more control and more responsibility, our health and well-being, that we have really so much on our fingertips that we can do to prevent any illnesses and issues, and to, when we have issues, to heal ourselves. And it is a theme in my life with lots of books and research and studying I'm doing. And this book is another piece of the puzzle. And it really gives me the encouragement to be like, I have all it takes to have a happy, healthy, long and longevity in there, the health span mentioned in there for people. It's fascinating. And it's my goal in life. So this book, it's exactly what I need to be reminded of. So again, thank you for having me here, for bringing this back to, my awareness, to reread it and to really refresh some of the incredible lessons in there.
Yeah, another reminder to read a good book is always a good reminder to read a good book, for sure. Well, thanks so much for coming. It's been awesome talking with you today. Thanks for sharing your ideas and your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me. And let's breathe through our noses more.
Good words of wisdom to end on. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Books Applied podcast. I hope you enjoyed getting to know a new book and learning how to apply its ideas to make your work, sport, or life a little bit more awesome. For more leadership education-related content, including conflict management checklists, invitations to a fun free lunch that happens monthly, upcoming classes, webinars, and mastermind groups, please head over to wslleadership.com. Thanks, and have a great day.